Drug shortages are and I'm quoting here from the Nuffield Trust, a health think tank, motivated, independent experts. Do you remember independent experts? Seems almost cruel to bring independent experts into a conversation shortly after saying the words Grant Shapps or indeed James Daly. But independent experts describe a new normal being the unavailability of pharmaceutical drugs. This is a conversation about medicines, not about illegal drugs or recreational drugs. Doctors, pharmacists, the NHS, and of course patients are unable to get their usual medication. And if you want numbers, in 2020, 648 warnings were issued regarding supply problems for certain products. Last year, that figure doubled to 1,000. It's more than doubled to 1,634. The lead author of the Nuffield Trust's report says the rise in shortages of vital medicines from rare to commonplace has been a shocking development that few would have expected a decade ago. I think the key word here is exacerbated, because Brexit is the reason given by the independent experts for the exacerbation of already existing problems. Direct comparisons with, for example, other EU countries show that we are doing worse. We are having more problems. It is not the case that had we stayed in the European Union, these problems would not exist. It would be dishonest and unhelpful to think so. But there are two stories here, aren't there? The first is that it's real and it's happening to you, and I want to know about it. Okay, we've done this once before. And the second, and Will has texted to remind me that a shortage of drugs was actually cited by Remain campaigners and labelled Project Fear by Leavers. You're absolutely right. And I've mentioned to you before that I catch myself having an odd response to Brexit stories now. If you're new to the programme, you may not know that Brexit, in many ways, getting Brexit right, getting every single thing right about Brexit, albeit too late to make any difference to the referendum result, is kind of what propelled this programme into a space it hadn't previously occupied. We not only got everything right about Brexit, we developed an uncanny knack for attracting people to the programme who thought they were right about Brexit, who would then fall apart in quite spectacular fashion. Everyone from Jacob Rees-Mogg down to your Auntie Doris would fall apart in quite spectacular fashion because they either said things that have subsequently been shown to be utter bilge, or they said things at the time which we managed to show were utter bilge. And oddly, so you know, if you're looking for a Brexit benefit, the only one you'll ever find is my career, and I say that with a very bittersweet tone. But even I now find myself thinking, should we talk about this without mentioning Brexit? Is it unhelpful to bring Brexit into it? It is being cited by independent experts as a key factor in the phenomenon, but the phenomenon is so important to our national interest and to you, to me, to people, to humans, that I feel almost duty-bound to find a way into it that manages to swerve the continuing rancour and unpleasantness that Brexit brings to the table. And listen, I know it brings rancour and unpleasantness to the table because some people still insist that the polar opposite of what they voted for is actually secretly what they voted for, or that there is a good Brexit and it goes to a different school, or that none of the problems caused by Brexit are actually caused by Brexit. And that's why it's not yet time to be honest about things and start undoing some of the damage. But can you have a conversation about Brexit-related problems yet in this country? That's the second bit. That's the second bit of the topic. But it's by far the least important bit, and it's very much a personal inquiry. What I would like you to do now is tell me directly how this affects you. So we know that type 2 diabetes medication, we know that ADHD medication, we know that epilepsy medication have been hit hard. We know that 3 ADHD drugs that were in short supply were meant to be back in normal circulation by the end of last year, but they are not. We know that lives are being imperiled. We know that health is being imperiled. Patients with serious illnesses, pharmacy bosses warned this morning, are having their health and indeed their potential survival compromised. Charities have seen a sharp rise in calls from patients unable to get their drugs. One says, this is the head of external affairs at the Epilepsy Society. I mean, epilepsy can be an incredibly debilitating condition, but a miracle of modern science is that it can be controlled. Some people never have another seizure again after their first one. If it's properly diagnosed and properly treated and the access to medication is complete, you can never have another seizure again. You never stop being epileptic, or some patients never stop being epileptic, but you never have to have another seizure again because the medication is so effective. And this is what the head of external affairs at the Epilepsy Society tells us. Our helpline has been inundated with calls from desperate people having to travel miles, often visiting multiple pharmacies to try to access their medication. So the entire government is queuing up to pretend that Angela Rayner's tax arrangements are the single, and much of the UK media. Front page of the Telegraph today, Angela Rayner. Front page of the Guardian, people with epilepsy having to tour the country searching for a pharmacy that stocks the drugs that they took for granted until 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. So I want to start with stories. I want to start with your stories and the lengths you are going to as a patient, or the lengths your patients are going to as a doctor or a pharmacist, or the reality of your experience as a doctor or as a pharmacist, and not just the logistics of it. I don't just want you to tell me about the difficulties, the saga, the journeys that you're making, the desperate phone calls, the midnight trips. I want to know from medical professionals what this does to you psychologically. I don't think when you became a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist, I don't think you ever thought you would see a day where looking patients in the eye and telling them you don't know where they're going to get their drugs from had become commonplace. Simon suggests that he could treat his diabetes with sovereignty, which brings us back to the much smaller element of this story, which is Brexit. But let's park that for a minute and let's look instead at the reality. So either you're the patient and you can tell me what you're having to do to get the stuff that used to be easy to get, or you're the healthcare professional and you can tell me what you're having to do to help the patients get the stuff they need that used to be easy to get, but also what it does to your sense of professional fulfillment or even pride. I always try and think of things that aren't immediately obvious when we find ourselves returning to territory that we've explored before. And there it is. You are a doctor and you are telling an ADHD patient or an epilepsy patient or a diabetic person, you're telling them, well, you need this, but I don't know where you're going to get it.